Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today on our LinkedIn Live. I'm joined with us today. We have actually a special guest. We have Rich Fuerstenberg, and Rich is a senior partner and one of the leading experts out there as it relates to matters related to life, absence, and disability. Hey Rich, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Good, John. Thanks for having me.
Good. So, Rich, before we get into it, why don't you tell our viewers who don't happen to know you just a little bit about yourself in maybe 10 or 15 seconds?
Sure. So I'm an actuary by background. Been with Mercer a little over 25 years at this point, and I've spent most of my time, as John you mentioned, specializing and working with clients on life absence disability issues across the country in all industries, and have learned an awful lot over that time frame, and dabble in some other stuff as well. But looking forward to the conversation. I feel like I'm on Kinder's Corner.
Absolutely. So, Rich, before we really go into it, right? So, you and I are both avid Mets fans, although candidly, you're probably a little bit more open about being a Mets fan than I have been over the last few years, right? But the Mets seem to be, up until the last few games, a pretty good team, right? They seem to be the team to beat in May, at least in the National League. So, really want your feedback and looking for your expertise. Are the New York Mets the team to beat in October?
Well, they're certainly in the mix. I always caution, people judge my level of intelligence, but you can't question my loyalty to. When I tell people I'm a fan of the Jets, Islanders, and Mets, that's a tough trifecta to live with for a really long
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I think the Mets are in good shape. But hey, look, they just lost James McCann, their starting catcher, to injuries. And injuries can deflate anybody's pennant expectation. So we'll see when Jacob deGrom comes back, slotting him into the rotation, hopefully get McGill back as well. If the pitching holds up, I like their chances.
Okay, well, good to hear. Good to hear. And certainly, since you mentioned the disabled list, one thing we want to talk about is what employers are doing as it relates to paid leave. But before we get started, just want to mention to all of you out there, feel free to comment in the chats and ask any questions you may have for Rich or myself during our LinkedIn Live session. So, without further ado, Rich, I give it over to you to tell the world what's going on and what employers are thinking about as it relates to paid leave and perhaps paid parental leave as well.
Yeah, so certainly parental leave has been one of the hot topics that we've been working with clients on for the last several years. As folks out there may know, Mercer does an absence disability management survey once every 2 to 3 years. It's kind of a complement to our more well-known survey on employer-sponsored health plans. So we get about 400 or so employers that participate in that survey. And we first started asking about paid parental leave back in 2015. And that the percentage of employers that offer that benefit has been on an upward trajectory. So it was 25% that offered it in 2015. In 2018, it went up to 40%. In our 2021
Wow.
survey, over 60%. And when you start slicing that by larger employers and in certain industries, that number is well over 80%. So in just a relatively short period of time, employers offered parental leave went from being way above market and being an outlier to the point where now I would argue you're a bit of an outlier if you do not offer paid parental leave. And back in the early days of parental leave, we saw it in high tech and financial services, especially like investment banking. Now we're seeing
Sure.
it in manufacturing and retail and hospitals and in a wide range of industries, even for hourly non-exempt employees, where I think a lot of people didn't think we would see it.
Right. And Rick, old enough to remember when 6 weeks of parental leave was kind of like the best benefit there was to offer, right? And I think you're continuing to see that 6 weeks is probably eventually going to be not so great of a benefit, right? And what do you think the future of paid parental leave is going to be? Do you think it's going to be unlimited? What are your thoughts on that?
So again, looking at our survey data, it is interesting that over the time we've been questioning about this topic, the 6 weeks really has changed. The median leave, which I prefer to look at the median than the average, has remained weeks from 2015 all the way through our 2021 survey. And when people ask me how that's possible, when I read in the press about certain employers who are doing 16 weeks or 26 weeks or longer, I don't dispute that that's what's happening. But as we're also seeing employers who are jumping in for the first time, they're not jumping in at 26 weeks. They're jumping in at 2 weeks and 4-week type leave. So you think of the median being 50% off or more and 50% off or less for all those sexy, really long leaves that you see. We also see a lot of employers that are just jumping in for the first time, and they're starting with a more manageable 2 to 4 week policy before potentially being on a trajectory to those longer leaves. But that's held the median pretty much in check. I do think that will change in the coming years. The Gates Foundation was one of the innovators. They actually did a 52-week leave, and this is in the public domain. They actually got that back 26 weeks based on some research that they had done. I believe 26 weeks was optimal leave that was in the best interest of both the child and the parent, and from a perspective of bonding and career continuity, easing back into the workforce. So I would say that's at least one data point to look at as far as what's an optimal leave for both parent and child, and arguably the employer and society at large. But I'd be surprised to see many employers blow past that 26-week spectrum. And I don't see too many that have gone well past 20 weeks at this point.
Fair enough, and great point, Rich. So one thing actually I saw from some clients recently ask me, in the great reshuffle and trying to offer some form of benefit for everyone is, hey, like, can we offer paid grandparent leave for brand new grandparents to perhaps offer new parents? I think that's something that's probably super, super new, and I imagine very few employers that have offered, but it would be interesting to see if that starts making a debut in the next year or so.
Well, I think the more logical complement that we're seeing to parental leave is time off of paid caregivers.
Sure.
And paid caregivers, if you think of the kind of the main 3 reasons people are eligible for FMLA, it's the employee's own serious health condition, bonding with a new child, and care of a sick family member. And a formal paid caregiver leave program is aligned with FMLA type requirements, not for incidental absences. We think that's a nice complement. It also clearly addresses a different demographic in the workforce than parental leave does. Older employees, where a sick parent or a sick spouse may be their primary life event need. But I also recognize that, from our survey data, it's far less prevalent. It's only around 25 to 30% of employers that offer a formal paid caregiver leave policy today. But I think that will start to inch up. But I also think that, unlike parental, where if you think about what that's intended to be is for an employee to bond with a child,
Sure.
I can't outsource that experience to a third party. But when it comes to caregiver leave, sometimes what an employee needs is not necessarily time off. They may need workplace flexibility.
Right.
They may need hours flexibility. They may need some other support, whether it comes from EAP or other specialty vendors that specialize in helping employees, find paid caregivers. So, paid time off is just one tool in that toolbox to help support employees with that need. But it's an important tool that, I think employers are starting to pay a lot more attention to in recent years.
Absolutely, Rich. So, if we switch gears and we talk about what other employers are doing in the marketplace as it relates to leave in general, I think I saw you were quoted in today's Wall Street Journal as it relates to some things that are going on Wall Street. So why don't you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so I think you're alluding to the Goldman Sachs article where they recently announced they're offering unlimited paid time off to some of their more senior employees, and that's an that we've seen in our survey data, where back in 2015, 2018, only about 14% of survey respondents said they were offering unlimited paid time off to some portion of their workforce. So they may be offering it just to the senior executives. They may be offering it to all exempt employees or to all employees. And offering it to all employees is a minority of what we see. But in 2015, 2018, that number stayed steady at 14%. Remember, our 2021 was employers completed that survey in the 21 timeframe. Certainly the pandemic has fueled interest and implementations in unlimited paid time off. But I think it addresses a couple of key issues that employers have been challenged with. One is, and the pandemic has certainly fueled the blurring of when people are working and when they're not. So you used to maybe have to take time off to let the plumber in or take a delivery and something like that. And now, if I have the ability to work from home, I don't necessarily need to do that. So how do you distinguish when I'm working and when I'm not? Or who among us can say that when they were on vacation, they didn't take a conference call or respond to email? And so how do you account for that if you're really trying to track time?
Right.
And it's gotten to the point where for a lot of days in certain roles, it's very difficult to even distinguish when they're on or off the clock. So that's certainly been one issue. Certainly through the pandemic, accrued paid time off built up to historic levels for many employers. With economy shut down in many parts of the country, employees uncomfortable with traveling, no place to go if they were willing to travel. That led to a lot of those accruals getting big and finding including with some clients that we had worked with that looking at unlimited paid time off in the past and said, remember that project we did, looked at a couple of years ago and we decided not to do it? Yeah, let's do that now. Let's finally pull the trigger on unlimited. And that, it may take some time to draw that accrual down, especially based on whatever states the employees work in. There are certain states like California and Colorado that don't permit employers to forfeit time that employees have accrued.
Right.
But that's been it's certainly been a hot topic, and it's gotten a lot of interest amongst employers certainly in the last year.
Very, very interesting. And then anything else with like maybe selling like vacation time? Have you seen that be of interest of any employers as of late?
Well, certainly the unlimited paid time off has been just one tool that employers
Sure.
have used to draw down those accruals, and selling back paid time off, mandatory shutdowns to help draw down PTO. All of those are kind of addressing a couple of different issues, and encouraging people to take time off. And we've seen a number of clients in the last year that have implemented days or shutdown days, whatever you want to characterize them as, where employers close, and I characterize it's the equivalent of a snow day. As I was talking about before on the unlimited mode, when people have unfettered ability to work from home, you no longer have snow days unless maybe you're fortunate to have your internet go down. Maybe that's the equivalent of a snow day nowadays. But these are real snow days where, as I said before, if you're on vacation, especially if you're taking 1 or 2 days off, it's often hard to totally avoid the temptation to check email, to am I missing that? There's just one I need to take, one meeting that I'm afraid I'm missing. And with these shutdown days, you're not missing anything. It is a snow day. Everybody's closed. No, you're not missing what's going on. So I think all of those are tools that employers have started to use as a result of the pandemic. Great ability to work from home, and really encouraging people to take time off. Selling time off is a whole different sort of resource if employees have it built up too much, and using it may not be practical. It may be in certain situations, employees in certain roles may not be able to use all the time off they have. So selling it may be a good option. I think that's one that there have been some platforms that have popped up that help support employers to employees to make that transition. There's some complex tax issues to navigate through, but I would say all of those things, the limited, the selling of time, down days, all of those are tools that employers are deploying with greater frequency than we saw prior to the COVID pandemic.
Absolutely. And I've seen some employers make a little bit of a splash out there in the news saying, hey, we know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And some have been saying, hey, our shutdown day is going to be in May, right? To help celebrate and help bring awareness for Mental Health Day. Right, Rich?
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, certainly tying it into, the company's DNA, their values, important. One of the things that we've seen from our survey data is As of 2021, 9% of employers are observing Juneteenth as one of their fixed holidays. So also tying in diversity and inclusion has been a key thing that employers have been thinking about.
Very, very interesting. So Rich, I guess one final thing to talk about. It seems that more and more states are offering some form of paid leave, right? So why don't you give our viewers out there an update in terms of what's going on the state level?
Yeah, so just this year, Maryland and Delaware passed, joining the group of states that mandate some sort of statutory disability or paid medical and family leave. Um, they joined states like New York and California and New Jersey, as well as a bunch of other states. Uh, Maryland and Delaware continue that they are states that offer that benefit. It's still an ocean. There's only one state that does. It's Colorado. Colorado hasn't yet implemented their law. Oregon is also in the process of implementation. So, in the Build Back Better bill, there was some paid family leave that was to that legislation that stalled in the Senate, and it appears that the states are now picking up the torch to keep pushing that forward. And employers, as well as for employees, it means a few different things. More about parental leave and caregiver leave. For employers that have looked at those benefits before, as the states that offer these benefits increase, it only offsets the cost on the paid family leave side. In most jurisdictions, those benefits are employee paid. So that's one thing to think about, just purely from a cost perspective. It can make those benefits more economical for the employer to offer. Second is from an employee experience perspective. Most of the states that have passed these laws do allow employers to establish some sort of private plan or insured plan, getting out of state administration. So for an employer that wants their employee to have kind of a holistic experience when they file their claim, and want to go to one-stop shopping to whoever the disability or leave vendor is, helping employers transition to those private plans has been increasingly popular for employers who are putting a premium on that employee experience and not having to wait and send the data to two different places, getting paid on two different cycles, getting, sometimes doctor's office in charge to get that sort of paperwork done. There's a hard dollar expense to send that to two different resources. So, that's certainly been a big motivator. And then the last one is just around general equity. We've had clients who have offered, who've said in response to employee requests that they can't do paid parental leave because they can't figure out how to operationalize it, or it's just too hard, or it's too expensive. And then as more and more states come along, employers say, well, now I've got so many employees that already have it as a state mandate, that argument starts to fall apart, and then they start offering it in the non-mandated states on a national basis. So I think those are probably the three big issues that we see, using it as a cost offset, improving employee experience, and also trying to find ways to make that benefit more valuable to employees. So I would say keeping up with all the state changes has been a challenge, and it's been certainly something that's kept us busy.
Right. So I guess, Rich, just on that point, right? If you're a national employer or at least a multi-state employer, you mentioned before the employee experience, right? If you want to have a consistent feel across the states in which an employer operates, is the private plan the way to go to try to mesh one national paid leave strategy together?
Administratively, absolutely. It's the only way to provide that holistic experience. There still could be some variation in the amount of entitlement, the level of benefit, but in terms of the employee experience, who they call, the information they need to provide, it's the only way for a multi-state employer to have that experience is to go the private plan route.
Very, very interesting. So, Rich, we did get a question in the chat, and I'm going to read it out to you. It's from Zachary Greenberg, and it says, do companies find that by going unlimited time off, employees actually take less days off? from their previous standard PTO because they're afraid of looking bad for taking too many days, or the opposite? Or do you find that employees are taking more days because it's available to them? And I know it's hard to, have empirical data, but anecdotally, what are you hearing out there?
So I'll give you some empirical data. So we do ask this question
Okay.
in our survey. So the employers who've implemented unlimited paid time off in our 21 survey, a little over 70% of employers who've made the transition have said the amount of time that employees take hasn't changed when they went to an unlimited paid time off policy. Of the less than 30% of employers who said that the amount of time off changed, it was by about a 2-to-1 margin that employers said that employees took less time than more. But I don't think it'd be an accurate state to say en masse that employees take less time. Again, at the aggregate level, what we're seeing from our survey data is that employees take about the same amount of time. However, I put a couple of major caveats on that.
Uh-oh.
First is that's at the holistic level. So any employer is going to have variation across business units, across different managers, not all managers. You might have some that are allowing their employees to take more time and some that are rejecting all requests. So while that might even out at the company level, I am 100% certain that there is uneven usage across the entire company. It is a little counterintuitive when an employer that goes to an unlimited or an untracked policy tells employees, well, we still want to track your time. And that's something that you can do for a variety of reasons. We strongly caution employers against using it at the individual employee level to say, hey, John, last year you took 4 weeks, or a new policy you took 5, or you only took 2, and use it at the managerial level to say, as a manager, you're approving way more or way. To look at a holistic company-wide level, I think that's certainly an appropriate thing. Certainly tracking time in limited policy for scheduling and staffing reasons is perfectly reasonable. But it is a little counterintuitive to tell people, well, we're not, take as much time as you want. We're not, but we still need you to record your time. So we just want to know what you're up to. So it's a little messaging, but it's certainly something that we've seen employers implement effectively. There's also been, I should say, recommend to clients putting in guidelines. I always caution clients about putting limits in an unlimited policy. You run the risk of starting to look more like an accrued policy if you start to put hard limits. But it's recognized, as you're going through the transition, people remember, well, I used to get 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and that's kind of what I might have in my head. But when you start going forward 3, 5, 10 years down the road of an unlimited policy, the memories of that start to fade. And what is a reasonable amount of time that I should be taking under a policy? So to have guidelines saying, look, at certain levels, we expect this is what you take. It provides coaching to managers. It provides coaching and cues to employees. But probably two of the biggest factors in making an unlimited policy work effectively and not having some of those negative side effects, like people taking way too much or way too little time. One is if you can execute it in an environment where the limit that actually applies, performance, the ability to get your job done, that sets as at least as an upper limit against taking too much time. On the lower end, having leaders, managers lead by example and showing that they are taking time and allowing their employees and staff to take time. It kind of creates that safe space. And part of Zachary's question that employees want to look bad, they're taking off too much time. But if I'm taking off as much time as my manager, maybe then I don't look as bad. Kind of following it, just by example. And employees should be public about that. Don't be shy and publicize when the CEO is on vacation and show him in front of Cinderella's castle in Disney World, or surfing, or on a cruise ship, or wherever he is. Let employees know that even he or she, our CEO, is taking paid time off, and that has a really positive ripple event downstream that sends the message to employees that yes, everybody takes paid time off at our company.
Very, very good. So, Rich, certainly a lot of great insight today. If there's an employer or maybe a prospect out there who wants to reach you directly, where's the best place they can go to reach you? Should they email you? Should they send you a message on LinkedIn? What do you recommend?
Well, certainly through LinkedIn. Yeah, my profile is there with all my contact info. So certainly folks can find me there.
Well, great. Well, Rich, thank you very much for your very first LinkedIn appearance. I think you did great. And for those of you out there, we thank you for attending and for your questions in the chat. Feel free to continue to ask questions along the way, and Rich and I will monitor them over the next few days, and we'll do our best to get back to you. And as always, we encourage you to like the video, share, and until next time, thank you for joining, and thank you, Rich.
Thanks, John.